Hello everybody, and today I wish to put President Trump's term into review. Now, this is regardless of the fact he gets a second term coming from 2021 to 2025, but in either case, I wish to put it into a generalized review. So to start it off, let us begin with a few disclaimers before I go into the foreign and domestic policies that he implemented. First, in terms of a disclaimer, let's look at the fact he had a lot of different obstacles to go through. He had to not only go past the establishment Republicans, which we have found out there are many within the Republican Party that have consistently fought against Trump. They did not like how Trump was leading the party and often did not support him whenever he was trying to pass certain legislations. Not just that, but he was also fighting against the Democrats consistently as well. They were calling him a racist and often saying that he colluded with Russia, which we ended up finding out did not occur, and there was an impeachment brought forward to him, which at the end of the day ended up failing due to the Senate. No thanks to Mitt Romney, right? So he had those obstacles to deal with, but not just that, he also had COVID to deal with, which will have its own point later in the video, but it did hamper a lot of the economic success for President Trump and may have also ended up ruining his second term bid. Now, that being said, those were some obstacles that he faced. The other disclaimer that I wish to put forward is the fact that I'm not going to highlight these social policies as much. And there's a few different reasons for that. First off is the fact that I do not believe the executive branch should have much impact when it comes in terms of social policies. I believe that it is unconstitutional, for example, to legalize gay marriage. Now, I myself believe that gay marriage should be legalized, but I believe it is by a state-by-state issue. It should not be the federal government to determine what each state has to follow through, because one of the beautiful things about America is if you do not agree with one state, you can move out of it. You're allowed to have mobility between different states, which should be dramatically different. If California wished to be a socialist utopia in many of the senses in which they're allowed to do, then by all means go for it. While you can have a more capitalistic state in terms of an Oklahoma or Texas, right? And then you have everything in between. Each state should be allowed to be ran how it wishes to be ran. So I don't think that we should be judging a president for these actions. So when a president doesn't push any social issues, it's not a benefit for him, that's just him doing his job. Now, if he did, for example, legalize gay marriage, and that would be a negative in my opinion. Again, not because I don't think gay marriage is right or wrong. I, again, support gay marriage, but that's just not the role that the president should fulfill. So, the fact that President Trump did not hamper in any way legalization of marijuana or other drugs depending on that one state does not mean that President Trump then should get props for them. It's just him doing his job, which he's staying out of the state affairs. Cool. Now, let us look towards the foreign policy, which there's quite a few different things to look at, and overall each one's better than the last. The first one being that he did get a symbolic victory in the very least by stepping on the grounds of North Korea. This helped formalize a lot of peace discussions with North Korea and really helped push us along in terms of relations with them. So that's the first one. I know a lot of people have issues with it, so it's a minor one in the very least. Issues being the fact that it didn't really amount to much later, but I will say again, with the obstructions that occurred, especially with COVID, it's lower on the priority than other things. On top of that, though, Trump had a lot of peace deals go through, and each one more significant than the last. One of them was the Kosovo and Serbia relations peace deal that occurred, in which he received Kosovo's Order of Freedom from President Hashim Thaci. I'm sorry if I mispronounced any of that, but that is one merit that can go underneath Trump's record. Beyond just that, he formalized a lot of deals between Israel and other Middle Eastern countries, such as Sudan, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. With these deals, he helped formalize and normalize a lot of peace deals between Islamic countries, which have traditionally and historically been anti-Israel. And he was able to bring these countries together. And hopefully this means that other countries in the Middle East will follow suit in the coming years. President Trump was able to open up what was once thought to be an unopenable door. And that in itself deserves a lot of props. I know that a lot of the Democrats do not like this because they have a big anti-Israel bias, but regardless, this was fantastic coming out of the Trump camp. So, moving after this, what we see also is that President Trump did not include us into any wars. I think that is fantastic, and I think a lot of conservatives would agree as well. The fact that we're not needlessly sending our troops into pointless wars to fight and die on foreign soil is great news. He has also managed to be able to pull out troops from a lot of these different countries in the Middle East and also from other countries such as Germany. Overall, Trump has done a great job. And when it comes to foreign policy, no new wars, a lot more peace deals, pulling out of our troops out of other countries. Great job, President Trump. He may have one of the best foreign policies of any president. He's at least up there top 5 in my opinion. He has done a spectacular job. Now, at the same time, Trump has taken a strong stance in trade, taking us out of many trade deals, which has caused a lot of issues for China, for example. Not just that, but it's also helped out the United States in a lot of these deals, which a lot of them caused the United States to lose out on billions of dollars. But the biggest point I say is he put a strong stance against China, which leads me to my next point, is Trump's stance against China. In this, one of his probably biggest accomplishments, even more so than the peace deals and no war, is how strong he stood against them. He showed support towards Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Tibet. And this is in contrast to something that we did not see out of President Obama, and we will not see out of President-elect Biden. They should throw softballs towards China, allowing China to take the driver's seat when it comes to being the superpower of the world. China is causing a lot of death, oppression, and destruction, not within just their own borders, but within other countries as well. So I think anyone that stands against that monstrosity of China deserves props, especially when a lot of other leaders are not doing the same. So with that, China had a shakeup in that regard. It actually had someone fight against them. Sadly, with Biden taking the lead, though, we're going to see China taking the driver's seat over once again. Now let's look over towards more of the domestic side, which includes both economically and the judicial aspects of it all, and then we'll talk about COVID afterwards. Economically, what we see is, let's look at one of the negatives of the Trump administration, which is debt. Trump managed to, when taking office, bring the U.S. national debt from $20 trillion to $27.5 trillion in a 4-year period. Now let's compare this to Bush and Obama. In an 8-year period for Bush, we saw a debt increase from $5.8 trillion to $11.9 trillion. Then we look at Obama, which we saw a debt increase from $11.9 trillion to $20.2 trillion. Again, Trump managed to increase the debt in 4 years about the same as what we saw underneath Bush and Obama. Overall, Trump had a significant gain, though not the highest debt change percentage. For debt change percentage, the highest goes to Ronald Reagan and George Bush Jr. However, in terms of total debt change in a single term, he did increase it by $7.3 trillion, which in comparison to Obama, Obama only increased it by $8.3 trillion across 2 terms. So, if we're going to praise Trump for the good, we have to hit him for the bad. And the bad was his views on debt. He was unable to cut the deficit, which we haven't really had a president able to do that. A true conservative president able to cut federal spending. He failed in that regard. He did not manage to cut Social Security, which is a failing product in itself, Medicare, Medicaid, or many welfare programs. I do understand we're in trying times and a pandemic did occur, which means there had to be, in some people's opinions, an increase in federal spending to offset that. But regardless, it is something to keep note of. If I'm going to bash a future president for it, I have to then bash Trump for it. But let's then look towards deregulation, in which we saw President Trump really put on the brakes for deregulation, but he did not decrease it. If you look at the number of significant rules by year from 2012 to 2016, roughly over 300 new rules were added. Compare this from 2017 to 2020, it went from 199 to 108 to 66, then 55 respectively per year. Overall, there was a decrease in total new rules added, but still there was some regulation. In either case, Trump did do better than his predecessors, specifically when you looked at what Hillary Clinton, which would have done, which she would have kept the status quo of about 300 per year. And we'll see what Biden does, but most likely would be the same status quo. Now let's look at the economy underneath Trump. Now again, everything cannot be assigned to just the president. It's really weird and perplexing that economy often goes straight underneath the president when it's not just the president that's influencing the economy. Each state has a bigger role in the economy than the president does. For example, look at the lockdowns. California and New York going on lockdown has a significantly higher impact to the economy than President Trump ever could have. What we see is we're entering a recession, or we are in a recession, potentially even depression due to COVID and these lockdowns because of what California is doing and what New York is doing, what these other states have done for these lockdowns that have occurred. And this is a bigger impact than Trump ever could do. Not just that, but there's other things in play as well, such as how the world is interacting with each other. So just because President Trump is in office, not everything can be attributed to him as well. Also, it's important to note that a president can have impact, but it may take years to see that impact. For example, I believe what we saw underneath Ronald Reagan in terms of trickle-down economics is you saw a huge increase in debt at the start, but you saw the longest reigning of prosperity 20 years after. The economy boost that we saw is due to trickle-down economics. You have that negative at the start, but long-term, there's a bigger beneficial benefit out of all of it, right? So this is in stark contrast to Keynesian economics, which you see a benefit short term, but long term you're going to see a harsher reality set into place. So everything that's stated right now, please do take it with a grain of salt. Some of it is underneath Trump, but other parts are not. But what we see is pre-COVID, Trump had a pretty excellent economy. Under Trump, the stock market was increasing at a rapid pace, hitting new highs much faster, albeit was still growing under the Obama administration. The unemployment rate was also at an all-time low. Again, it was decreasing underneath the Obama administration, but underneath the Trump administration, before COVID hit, it was at 3.5%. Kind of amazing if you really think about it in that regard. For total employees on non-payroll, Trump was having an increase which saw a high of 152 million, but did drop again due to COVID. Key to note, GDP growth was normal across the board, same as past presidents. However, in contrast, the median household income did skyrocket underneath Trump. While this does match with the massive wage growth, which we saw underneath Trump yet again. The biggest issue, as I stated again, is that there's other factors that do impact our economy. One direct impact, though, that Trump did do was he reduced visas being handed out for jobs so that Americans could get jobs first. So that is one thing that we saw Trump play a hand for, and which probably did impact the unemployment. Now, let's move over towards a few other things that Trump did domestically, one of which being the wall. This is quite the controversial decision in terms of the left, because they viewed it as racist and said it was ineffective. However, we're finding out that's not exactly true. As of November 13th, over 400 miles of wall has been built so far. Per the new Border Patrol chief of 2020, the wall is 90% effective, up from just 10% before it was built. Due to the wall being built, there is now over 150 less Border Patrol agents being required, which saves $28 million in salaries and benefits. Also, with the better border road, vehicles are lasting longer from 40 to 60k miles to 100k miles. Per the DHS.gov website, there are massive decreases in illegal activity. In the Yuma sector, for example, illegal entries are decreasing by more than 1,000 per month. The RGV sector has seen a 79% decrease in apprehensions since completion of the border wall system. In the El Paso sector, there has been a significant reduction in drug and smuggling activities. Again, for these statistics and everything else I have stated before, look down in the description yourself and please do the research yourself. Don't just take my word. It's better to stay informed. Overall, though, I think it's safe to say that the wall has been working for where it's complete and it's not ineffective like many of the Democrats would like to say. But let's then look towards one of Trump's other greatest achievements, probably rivaling or just slightly below his foreign policy, and that's his judicial achievements, in which we saw him appoint up to 227 federal judges. The only president to appoint more was Jimmy Carter, who picked 260 federal judges. This is significant for the long-term federal impact that it's going to leave in terms of the judicial system. But not just that, he appointed 3 Supreme Court judges, which we saw them being Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and ACB. Now, it's up to you what your opinion of them are. I think one of them is fantastic and the other 2 are pretty good as well. Please do research them for yourself, though. I'm not going to say who I think is what, because I think every person should have their own opinion on them. Please research each one. We're going to be having them for at least 10 to 20 years, hopefully longer in good health. And as long as President-elect Joe Biden does not pack the courts, President Trump will have effectively change the judicial system for the coming years. This will be his longest lasting impact that he has done. So, good job, Trump. Now, let's move over towards his COVID response. Overall, I think Trump has done good. He could have improved, but he's done better than what I think Hillary Clinton could have done or President-elect Biden would have done. President Trump did not push for lockdowns to continue after the initial bit occurred, as well as he put in a travel ban on January 31st. This is before any of the Democrat leaders ever wanted to do. For example, we saw Nancy Pelosi in February encouraging large groups to stay together while she was down in Chinatown. So he was often staying ahead of the curve in that regard. He also managed to increase our supply of masks overall, which we saw a depletion underneath the Obama presidency. Again, though, we see that COVID was devastating and that every single country in the world was hit. I do think that President Trump was ahead of the curve, but a lot of the Democrats want to discredit him, saying that he was being racist at the time, and then they said he didn't do enough, even though he was one of the first to enact travel bans, when at the same time Nancy Pelosi wanted large groups to occur. Who knows how much damage Nancy Pelosi did by saying all this, if anyone actually took her seriously. I know she's a bit of a deranged kook, right? In general, though, Trump's COVID response was pretty good. It's hard to say exactly where we'd be as a country if there was no COVID. Perhaps our economy would be 10 times better than it is right now. But COVID brought about not just lasting economic damage, but it also brought about a lot of the riots that we see nowadays. I think a lot of the race relations and riots that we see were increased due to COVID lockdowns because people got stir crazy as well. It is also important to note that during this year, we saw just COVID really bring depression about in people because they're locked inside. A lot of riots occurring throughout the country due to racial tensions, but not just racial tensions, but just overall what people viewed as injustices, hatred towards cops, etc. It's been quite the difficult year and turbulent year in which President Trump could have unified us better in some regards, but he also was limited in a lot of different regards too. He's in a damned if you do, damned if you don't position where he was told he needs to step in and stop these riots, but he didn't have the jurisdiction to do so. If you look at the Insurrectionist Act, for example, he could only enter states if the governors gave him permission. But these governors, such as over in Oregon, for example, were not allowing him to go in, and thus these riots were occurring. People blamed Trump, but Trump couldn't do anything about it. So we saw a lot of great cities and states crumble. And overall, it's very difficult to gauge what Trump could have or could not have done. He could have came out a lot more speeches trying to unify the country, but he also did say in a lot of his speeches that he did give, condemning these riots, a lot of these hateful movements. So he tried the best that he could. But what we see is that President Trump has done a lot of good for the country in terms of his foreign policy, in terms of his judicial side of it, and we did see a good economy underneath him. He did do a bad job when it comes to the debt and cutting any federal spending, but again, COVID came about, which how much federal spending can you actually cut with COVID around? But even before COVID coming around, it wasn't a big priority for Trump to cut federal spending. Now, what we missed out on in terms of a second Trump presidency and what he was trying to project that he wanted to do was, first off, school choice, which would have impacted a lot of students in a beneficial way. Not just school choice specifically, but also we probably would have seen some federal spending get cut. What we saw with the payroll deferment in terms of Social Security is that Trump wanted to cut Social Security as much as possible, and the payroll deferment was a means to show the American public, hey, look how much money you could be saving. It was a step towards doing all of this. But sadly, we were unable to see that. But not just between those two things, we also missed out on a chance to see a stronger stance against China, which we will not see underneath a Biden presidency. Biden presidency will be incredibly soft towards China, allowing China to take the reins. These are the three main things that we're really going to miss out on a second Trump presidency. Overall, though, I think President Trump has done a fantastic job and has been one of the better presidents we've ever had. Top 10, I would even say, even though a lot of Democrats would say he's probably the worst president we've ever had. Either way, please let me know down in the comment section what you think on how President Trump has done. Thank you for watching. Please do leave a like, subscribe. Please do look down in the description for all of my links that I have left below so you can do research for yourself. And anyways, God bless America.